Hey there, this is a tutorial on how to make a glossy button for your web page using GIMP. So you'll need to go ahead and start up GIMP, and once you do, create a new image. We'll be using a 640 by 400 pixel. That'll give us plenty of room for the button. Buttons generally are not that big, but for demonstration purposes, I'm going to make this a big button. You can always shrink that in size to fit your web page using code, or you can resize it right in GIMP after you're done. But in any case, let's go ahead and get started. So now that you have a transparent background here, let's go ahead and create our initial button shape. And what you'll want to do is get the rectangle selection tool. Make sure your rounded corners is checked and that is set to 50. You can edit this option as you feel fit. Make sure none of the other checkboxes are checked. Go ahead and draw you a shape. It doesn't really matter what size you draw it, because we're going to come down here in the size options and we're going to edit this. Let's go ahead and make this 500 by 150. Okay, now that we have that, let's get our bucket fill tool. Use the color picker to select black. Let's fill our shape with black. Good. Now, our next step is to create a new layer. With our selection marquee still active, we'll want to shrink this selection. What we're going to do is we're going to create another selected area and fill it. Okay, we'll need to change this to 10 pixels here. Shrink it by 10 pixels. Here in the tools options, you'll want to make sure that the blend mode is set to normal. Opacity is set at 100. If it's not, of course, we need to set that. Make sure that the gradient type is set to foreground to background. If it's not, click the little preview icon here and go down here where it says FG to BG. That means foreground to background. And what that's saying is we want a gradient to go from red to black. Now, we have a couple of options here. This back and forth arrow toggles black to red or red to black. Let's go ahead and make sure that that is going from red to black. The shape needs to be set to bilinear. If you need to set that, there's a drop-down box here. Make sure that's at bilinear. Make sure your other settings are set the same. Once you've completed that step, let's go over here to the scrolling marquee, which are these little dancing dots here. And we'll start from the top and we'll just pull down in a straight line. When we release the button, we'll have our gradient effect. Okay, our next step is to apply sort of the lighting that will create the glossy effect. So let's go ahead and let's make sure everything is unselected. So select and then none. We'll create a new layer. And for this layer, what we'll need to do is we'll need to get our original selection, which is our background layer. So come over here, make sure that the background layer is selected. Go over here and get the fuzzy select tool. Make sure that the select transparent areas is unchecked. We'll turn that off. Mine was checked, but make sure there is no check there. Keep anti-aliasing checked. And threshold, since we have a solid color, we should probably make that 0. If we had, varying colors within our shape, then maybe we would set a threshold. Here, we don't need a threshold. Now, come over here, and with the background layer selected and your fuzzy tool selection tool selected, come somewhere in the middle and click. Notice that you get a scrolling marquee all around the black background area. Now what we'll do is we'll go back to our newly created layer, select the Ellipse Selection tool. Make sure that the mode down here is set to intersect. You have different options. It defaults at your last setting, so make sure it's set to intersect. And you'll see the reason why here in just a minute. Make sure all of these other settings are pretty much the same. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll just somewhere come up into the upper left-hand corner. Click and drag, and what we want to do is just sort of make sure that the top of the ellipse is well above the button, and then we want that rounded curve of the ellipse to come right along to round about the middle of that button. Now, notice that the little scrolling marquee sort of intersected with our oval shape. All right, so now we have this shape here becomes our newly selected region. Now, with our newly selected region, we'll want to come up here and shrink it. So go to the Select and Shrink. We're going to shrink this by 3 pixels. Okay, now what we'll need to do is go over here and select our blend tool, because now we're going to apply a gradient that's going to give it that glossy effect. We want our foreground color to be white, so choose white. Make sure that the HTML notation is FF, FF, FF. All right, now we want to set our opacity to 80. Oops. So let's set the opacity to 80. Let me get this back in here. Okay. Where did that go? Okay. I just double clicked in there. Click 80.0. All right. We'll want to change the gradient type to foreground to transparent. Now make sure it is going from white to transparent. Again, if not, use your reverse button here to change it. Shape should be bilinear. The rest should match my settings. Now, just come over here to the scrolling marquee, and somewhere at the top of it, start and then pull down to just below it. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at our product so far by Select and None. Notice how that does give it a nice glossy appearance. All we need now is some text on this button. Let's go ahead and add some text. I'm going to do an Arial rounded size 100 text with a white foreground color. You can choose whatever settings you like here. You can experiment with the size. If that's not the size you want, then that's fine. But for this demonstration, this is what I'm going to use. So I'm going to go ahead and make me a home button here. Okay, and after I create that text here, I'm just going to kind of get my move tool and move it into place. Okay, and the last step is to go ahead and take that glossy effect and just pull it above the text. We want that to overlay that, especially if your text were to be black or some other color than white, then you want that glossy effect to sort of spill over onto your text. So, okay, now we have one more final step. We want to cut away the extra space here. So let's go over here and get our crop tool and make sure your settings are, the same as mine. And what we'll do is we'll just kind of crop away all of this extra space here. Leave just a tiny bit. We don't want to cut into our button or anything. So I'm just going to sort of adjust this, and then I'm just going to come in here and double click and let that take effect. So here we have our button, and to add, we can use this as a template. We can just hide that, add new text as new layers, and export them as buttons. So there is your tutorial on how to make a shiny, glossy button.